The world of shadows is not built in sunlight. It is formed in whispers, in hidden corners, and in moments that defy belief. Tonight's story, presented exclusively on Epic Story Hub, begins with a woman no one expected to make history. A woman whose single shot would silence even the most hardened warriors, the Navy SEALs. But before that moment unfolded, her life seemed ordinary, painfully ordinary, and perhaps that's why destiny chose her. She lived in the quiet outskirts of a coastal city, where military ships often roared past in the distance. Neighbors knew her as Elise, an introverted woman in her mid-30s who worked at a bookstore. Her hands smelled of paper and ink, not gunpowder or steel. She had no military background, no record of combat training. To the outside world, Elise was forgettable, but in her silence lay a secret she had carried since childhood. A secret about sight, about focus, about the ability to lock her vision onto something in motion and hold it steady longer than any trained soldier could. This gift, or curse, was something she had discovered at the age of 12. She had once picked up her father's old hunting rifle, aimed at a bottle swaying in the breeze nearly 400 yards away, and shattered it with a single shot. At first, her father thought it was luck, but when she repeated it again, and again with impossible accuracy, fear replaced pride in his eyes. From then on, her ability was buried deep, spoken of only in hushed tones, as if it was something dangerous. Years passed, and Elise lived quietly, almost hiding from the world. But fate does not let extraordinary remain hidden for long. One stormy evening, as rain hammered the city streets and thunder rolled like cannon fire, Elise walked home from the bookstore. She noticed something unusual. 2 black SUVs parked outside her small apartment building, their engines still running, their tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. Elise's pulse quickened. She had no enemies, no debts, no ties to anything dangerous, or so she thought. When she entered her apartment, she found 3 men waiting inside. They weren't burglars. Their posture was too precise, their eyes too sharp. One of them, tall with a grizzled jaw, stepped forward. "Elise Turner?" he asked in a voice that carried authority. She nodded, her breath caught in her chest. "We need your help," he said simply. "And before you refuse, you should know. The Navy SEALs already tried. They failed." The room spun around her. Her help? Against something even the SEALs couldn't handle? This had to be a mistake. But the men weren't joking. They handed her a sealed envelope, stamped with insignias she had only ever seen on government files. Inside was a single photograph, a target, a man whose face radiated menace even on paper. Alongside it, coordinates scribbled in ink. "You have 1 shot," the tall man said. "1 chance. That's all we need from you." Elise wanted to laugh, to scream, to demand they leave, but deep inside, that dormant power, the steady sight, the unshakable focus, stirred awake. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of inevitability. The days that followed blurred into a storm of secrecy. Elise was taken to a remote training ground, far from the city. There she met them, the Navy SEALs themselves. Hardened warriors, scarred by years of impossible missions. Men who had looked death in the face and returned with cold stares. They did not welcome her. In their eyes, she was an intruder, a civilian, someone who didn't belong in their world. "You're wasting our time," one of them muttered as she was handed a rifle. But orders were orders. Elise stood on the firing line, the weapon cold and heavy in her hands. Targets were set hundreds of meters away. The SEALs watched with folded arms, waiting for her to humiliate herself. She steadied her breathing, lined her sight, and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle split the silence. The bullet tore through the air, striking the target dead center, then another, and another. Each shot was flawless, faster than even the instructors expected. When the last target fell, silence gripped the field. Even the SEALs, men who had seen the impossible, stared in disbelief. "She's not just good," one finally said, his voice low. "She's inhuman," but Elise felt no pride. Her heart hammered in her chest, because she knew this wasn't about targets on a field. This was about real lives, real enemies, and real danger. And soon, she would find herself in a situation where one pull of her trigger would change everything. As night fell, Elise sat alone in her barracks, the whispers of doubt crawling through her mind. Who was this man she had been asked to kill? Why had the SEALs failed? And why her, a bookstore clerk, chosen to finish what elite warriors could not? The rain returned, lashing against the window as if warning her of what was to come. Elise closed her eyes, but sleep did not come. Instead, she saw a vision. Herself, rifle in hand, the world holding its breath as her finger brushed the trigger. And somewhere in the darkness a voice whispered, "When the moment comes, you won't just change the mission. You'll change history." Her fate was sealed. This was only the beginning. Stories of war, sacrifice, and the men who stand as shields for their nations are whispered through history. But every so often, a story emerges that bends the rules of possibility. A story that begins not with a soldier, not with a commander, but with someone no one expected. Tonight's tale is one such story. It is about a woman whose single shot stunned even the Navy SEALs, the elite warriors of the deep. Her name was Elise Turner. By day, she was nothing more than a quiet figure shelving books in a dusty coastal shop. To her neighbors, she was polite but distant. To her coworkers, she was dependable yet unremarkable. If you had asked anyone about her, they would have shrugged and said she was the kind of person who could vanish from a room without being noticed. But behind her still eyes was a secret, one that even she had tried to bury. That secret revealed itself when she was 12 years old. Her father, a retired hunter, had left his rifle resting against the porch rail one summer afternoon. Elise, curious, had picked it up and pointed it toward an old glass bottle balanced on a fence post hundreds of yards away. With no instruction, no hesitation, she squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out and the bottle exploded into shards. Her father, watching from the window, froze. He assumed it was luck. Until she did it again. And again. And again. What should have been pride turned to unease. A child with that kind of accuracy was not normal. He locked the rifle away and told her to forget what she had done. But gifts like hers don't disappear. They hide. They wait. Years passed. Elise grew up, finished school, and took comfort in a life of obscurity. She worked at the bookstore, spent evenings walking the shoreline, and convinced herself that her gift had been nothing more than a strange childhood trick. But fate has a way of resurfacing buried truths. One storm-laden night, Elise noticed 2 black SUVs idling outside her apartment building. Their windows were tinted, engines rumbling low. Something about them made her stomach twist. She hurried inside, rain dripping from her coat, only to find 3 men waiting in her living room. They weren't burglars. Their stances were military, their eyes sharp. The tallest one stepped forward, his voice firm. "Elise Turner?" Her throat tightened. "Yes." He handed her a sealed envelope. "We need your help." "The Navy SEALs already tried. They failed." The words struck her like lightning. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph of a man. Hard features, scarred cheek, eyes like steel. Below it, coordinates scrawled in ink. "One shot," the man said. "That's all we ask. One chance. You're the only one who can make it." Elise laughed, a nervous, broken sound. "You must be mistaken. I work in a bookstore." But they weren't mistaken. They knew her secret. Somehow, some file buried deep in government archives had tracked her childhood talent. And now, with the world teetering on the edge of a threat no one would name, they had come knocking. Against every instinct, Elise found herself transported days later to a remote training compound. The air smelled of gun oil and wet earth, and there, waiting, were the SEALs themselves. Hardened men who had spent lifetimes in shadows, who had carried out missions whispered about in classified corridors. Their expressions were stone when they saw her. "You brought us a civilian," one spat under his breath. "This is a joke." Orders silenced their protests. Elise was handed a rifle, its weight both foreign and familiar in her hands. Targets lined the horizon, some stationary, others swinging unpredictably in the wind. She closed her eyes, steadied her breath, and remembered the stillness that had once flowed through her veins. The first shot cracked the air. Dead center. The second shattered a swinging target mid-arc. The third split a bullseye at nearly half a mile. When the dust settled, silence hung over the field. These men, who had seen the impossible, stared at her in disbelief. "She's not just accurate," one finally muttered. "She's impossible," but Elise felt no triumph. Only dread, because targets on a training field weren't the same as flesh and blood. This wasn't about practice. It was about ending a life. That night, as rain lashed against the barracks windows, Elise lay awake, haunted by the photograph of the man in the envelope. Who was he? Why had the SEALs failed to take him down? And why her? Sleep came in fragments, filled with visions. Visions of herself lining up the shot, of men in black watching silently, of history itself pausing at the squeeze of her finger. In her dreams, a voice whispered, "When the time comes, your shot won't just end a mission. It will change everything." Her journey into the shadows had begun. And the SEALs, men who feared nothing, would soon witness the moment her trigger finger silenced even them.